Yes, my name is Hope. And this is my husband, Jazz, and he's just going to do a brief introduction about himself.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Jazz. My Chinese name is Zhijing Li. I am born in China, grew up in China, and we moved back to Canada last year. And I'm from the Sichuan, Chengdu. Anyone knows Sichuan? Spicy food, very hot. Yep. Okay. I believe Jesus Christ in 1999 when I was a student, and I graduated in 2001, and I joined the Power to Change at the 2003. The first 5 years, I worked in the campus with 3 different campuses, and the second 5 years, I worked with the national team, the travel whole China to the many different cities to preach in the house church and the student fellowship, some young professional fellowship, to do the mission mobilization and the mission education. And I met Hope in 2008, and we married in 2009. And how about I give it to you?
Okay, so actually I was born here in Montreal. My dad is originally from the South Shore. My mom is from Gaspé, but they both came here to Montreal to go to McGill. And so at a young age, my family actually moved from Montreal to the Ottawa area, small town outside of Ottawa called Arnprior. Population of 6,000 people, so it's a huge place. So they moved from Montreal to a small little village, basically. And that's actually, I grew up in the Ottawa area. Today what I'm going to share with you, because we're approaching Easter, the past few weeks as we've been on campus, as you heard, we're serving with Power to Change, working with international students at the University of Carleton and the University of Ottawa, both located in our nation's capital. And the last few weeks, as we've been meeting with these international students, it's been interesting talking with Chinese students, Malaysian students, etc., talking about our faith and sharing about Easter. And they're like, oh yeah, they're going to have an Easter egg hunt. And I said, yeah, the Easter egg hunt is just part of the whole picture of Easter. And so as we were talking, they were like, so wait a second, you believe that Jesus died on the cross and then 3 days later rose again? And I was like, yeah. Basically, they're looking at you like you're an idiot, because they can't, it's hard in your own human mind to think that this could happen. But of course, we believe that because Jesus is God, that this is possible. So anyways, I wanted to share about the power of the resurrection, and through the power of the resurrection that we can share the gospel, the good news of Jesus, and celebrate not just Christmas, because everybody knows about Christmas. If you talk to international students, I've realized that every student has heard about Christmas, almost. But when you ask them about Easter, like, have you ever heard of Easter? They look at you like, no, I've never heard of Easter. And yet, Easter is so fundamental to our faith. Like, without Jesus' death on the cross, without him paying the penalty for our sin and then rising again so that we can be free, our faith is just kind of useless. So I thought I'd start off by just reading this scripture. I love that the Bible is filled with scriptures about the resurrection. But as I was sharing with students this week, I was just thinking about the reason that we can share the gospel is because of the power of the resurrection. So in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 12, it says, "Now if Christ is proclaimed as raised from the dead, how can some of you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? But if there is no resurrection of the dead, and then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain, and your faith is in vain." So I thought that was really powerful, because we believe that Christ has risen. And so that gives us the authority to preach the gospel. So what I want to do today is share part of my testimony of how I went from this small town in Arnprior to serving in China for 12 years and then back here with the thread that it's all because of the gospel and the power of the resurrection. So, in 1997, I graduated from high school. Yes. And I went to the University of Guelph, which is southern Ontario. And I was so excited. I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents were they like to know, like, at 10 p.m., you're going to be in the house. They were pretty controlling, for a lack of a better word. Now I see it as their love. They were using that as protection for me, but at the time I thought, oh, like 10 o'clock, all my friends can be out later. So like most people for the first time, I was so excited to go and live in a dorm, and you had a meal card, and like you had money, and you could do what you wanted. So for the first time I was like, I thought I have freedom. But I realized that freedom is just the worldviews of freedom, not the freedom in Jesus. I already had the freedom in Jesus, but I didn't want to live that out. So I would stay up really late and then sleep in really late and kind of live the student life. Probably if you're a student here today, you live that life. That's just the way it is. When I talk to students on campus, I ask them, like, what time do you go to bed? And they're like, 2 or 3. And they ask me, and I'm like, 10. So it's interesting how life changes. But so I thought I was experiencing freedom. And I ended up living a life that was dishonoring to God and unpleasing to Him. And in my second year of university, Power to Change, formerly known as Campus Crusade for Christ, they were doing this debate on heaven and hell. And I was like, okay. So the title was actually, the poster was very catching. So I went, and I ended up getting involved with Power to Change. And through my involvement in Power to Change, I just understood the spirit-filled life. Growing up in a church that I didn't really understand, that I thought like it was kind of a checklist, like very legalistic. Like you get up, you pray, you do this, you pray. My grandparents were like that. They all grew up in this kind of culture. And so I felt like the Christian life was just a checklist, and I felt like that was really hard. So it wasn't until getting involved with Power to Change, I realized that like Jesus actually freedom, like believing in Him and living a Christian life is actually very freeing. So one of my friends, when I was getting in my second year, said, hey, you should come with me to China. We're going to go on a missions trip with Power to Change. And so I called my family and I said, oh, I want to go on this trip. And they're like, China's so far. And I had never, growing up in my hometown, there was no like Chinese people, no other ethnicities. It was just like Caucasians, very redneck small town. And so like I didn't know anything. Like my idea of Chinese food was like fried rice, chicken balls, and egg rolls. So in May in China is very hot. So I wore like some clothes on the plane that I thought were comfortable, but my suitcase got lost and they couldn't find it for several days. And so I had like all these heavy clothes and it was so hot. And I remember meeting my friends, the Chinese students, and they were like, you're from Canada? Oh, I've never been to Canada. Is it in America? And I was like, no, it's just above America. Like it's a separate country. But I'll never forget the first time going to China and sharing the gospel with students on our campus. It was a very small university. There's only 2,000 students on the campus, and there was a team of 8 of us. We shared the gospel with every student on that campus because we were there for 6 weeks. But when I was sharing with the students about Jesus, like I would say to them, have you ever read the Bible? And they would say, no, I don't even know what the Bible is. And I would show them, and they were like, I don't even know where you could get one. And I said, oh, well, there's probably a church in the city. We'll find it for you. And then as we shared like the gospel with them, they were like, yeah, I've heard of Jesus. He's from the West. And I was like, actually, no, he's from the East. But this was the conception that they had. Like, they didn't understand who Jesus Christ is. And so we would share with them, and sharing the miracles of Christ, all through the Gospels, is Jesus does many miracles, many of them among internationals. And just the students, as they would see those, we showed the Jesus film to them. I don't know if you've ever seen the Jesus film, but it is phenomenal. Like, when you play that for somebody who never has been exposed to Christ, and they're like watching Jesus heal people, Jesus the healer, Jesus the one who can feed the thousands, their eyes, like their jaw, like literally drops. And they're like, how can that be? Like, no. And they would look at me and be like, Mao Zedong can't do that. I'm like, no, because he's dead. But Jesus is a living God. But just a disillusionment with the government and just their situation really opened their hearts to want to know the Jesus of miracles, like calming the waters. When they watched the Jesus film and watching Jesus rebuke the disciples and say, how you have little faith, and the waters also calm. When the students people that had never heard of Christ, when they would see those things, they were just like, wow, I can't believe that this is the God that you're telling me about. And that they were very shocked, and they realized that this Jesus is good news. And so it was also a wake-up call for me, because I went on the missions trip thinking, like, I want to go, I have a whole summer off. I don't want to be selfish with my time. And my family was very supportive. Like, I didn't really have a job lined up either. And my family was very supportive. So I thought, why not? But when I watched the students look at those miracles, like watching the students as we were sharing the gospel with them, and they were so like in awe of Christ, it actually reconfirmed my faith and my belief in Jesus, and gave me the passion to want to like read those, from Sunday school, learning, like growing up in the church from Sunday school, those things, and being all over again attracted to like Jesus, and so like when we shared the Jesus film, we had a VCR. It was back in the days of the VCR. So a lot of times the VCR thing didn't work well. And like we played the tape so many times that it would like skip certain times, because the students, they would want to watch the miracles over and over again because they just couldn't believe that. But I think like a lot of times in our Christian faith, if you've been a Christian for a long time or you've grown up in the church, you kind of feel like, oh yeah, I remember that story. My Sunday school teacher taught me about Jesus feeding the thousands. And I remember when, like Palm Sunday, today, Palm Sunday. Yeah, I remember that story, And when I was a kid at our church, we would often walk down the aisle with palm branches. And so then on Easter Sunday, you're like, yeah, I remember that. But it's like, when you think about it again, like this is the Jesus that we worship, and he's worthy of our worship. And so I think it was through the eyes of actually doing ministry and sharing the gospel that my faith was like connected and like just re-solidified that this Jesus is totally worth all worship. Huh? Oh. Okay. It's the one thing I don't like is technology. It works well if you know how to work it, but if you don't, then it's not so helpful. So this is a picture. So during our summer project, these were some of the students that became believers. And so our last day, we called it a Canadian party, and we invited all of our friends who had accepted Christ so that we could introduce them to our friends who were going to do like follow up with them, because we wanted to make sure that they got connected to a local church. And so we had a party, and They taught us the Chinese national anthem, and we taught them "O Canada," in both French and English. And so this was the students, and it was so exciting to see them all get together. And they didn't know why they came, because we just called it a Canadian party for security reasons. But then at the party, they were like asking their neighbor beside them, like, "So, are you a Christian?" And they were like, "Yeah, I just heard about Jesus this past few weeks." And then the guy would say, like, "Yeah, so am I. I'm a Christian too." And it was really a time of, like, for them just to understand that they weren't alone on their campus, and that they weren't just all by themselves, and then getting them connected with a local church. And so that was just really exciting to see them all together. And that's a long time ago, but it's a really cute picture. That was in 2000. And this girl was my very first friend on campus. And the very first day, she said to me that she had been praying that she would know other Christians, because her family were believers. And she had come to the school, and she didn't know anybody that was a believer. And so she said, like, first of all, when I met her, she said, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, "Yes, I'm a Christian." And she said, "Yeah, I thought so, because you're from the West." I think it was because everybody from the West is a Christian. But it's interesting, because I wish that some of these students could understand, and maybe if you are an international student here, you understand now that not everybody in Canada is a believer, and that most people actually aren't. Unfortunate reality, but it's true. But she was very excited to meet other Christians on her campus. Her name was Wang Xiaoli. So in 2000, I went on the summer project, and then in 2001, upon graduation, I decided to go back. So I told my family that I was going to go for a year. My parents weren't very excited, to be honest, even though they were believers. But my grandfather on my mom's side, he actually was very supportive. And so he kind of had the clout with my mom, because he said, "No, this is a really good opportunity." And actually, he had been praying since, because my name is Hope, like I almost died at birth. And so my grandparents had been praying that I would bring the gospel to unknown peoples. And so I actually decided to go to China as a missionary, and my grandfather died that same day. And so it was a confirmation to my family, it was a confirmation to my family that this is what God really wanted me to do. And so my mom did not have a choice, because her dad said, so everything was fine. I guess in Asian families, the parents are, they have a big say in family, but it also happens in Caucasian families too. So after that summer, I went back to Asia, and I went for a year. And it was really interesting, because I knew that through that summer, the Lord really gave me just clarity from His Word that we should be sharing the gospel. In Romans, it talks about the beautiful feet that bring good news. And also in Romans, it talks about how Paul didn't want to build on other people's territory. And in this city, it was a small city, very dusty. But it was just, the students were very eager to know about Jesus. And I knew that to give a year, that's my plan. I told my family, I'm going to go for a year. After a year, I'll reevaluate. But I knew that doing that and sharing the gospel with the students of people who have never had the opportunity to know Jesus was just the best thing that I could do with my life at the time. So I went, and I went under the guidelines of an English teacher. So I taught 140 freshman students English conversation and culture. I actually got fired from the job, basically, because at Easter, I don't know if you're familiar, but in Chinese, there's a book called Youziyin, and it's like the apologetics for the Christian faith. So I photocopied resurrection chapter for the students, and I gave it to all of my students in my class as an Easter gift with an Easter bunny. But the school did not like that. So they're like, you can't do that. We told you at Christmas, you can't tell the students about Jesus. And so I was like, okay. So then I wanted to stay, but they didn't want me to teach because they said, we've told you and you don't seem to listen. And it was partly my fault, but I felt like I had all these students captured audience for 2 hours a week. I have to tell them. What if this is their only opportunity to hear? So I didn't continue teaching and I moved on to studying. But I was surprised because when we would show, we showed the Jesus film to all 140 students over the Easter break. We had an apartment on campus and we would invite 20 at a time. And it was exciting to see, again, just the confirmation, watching Jesus, our Lord and Savior, just in the film, and them watching it. It was just so amazing for their eyes just to be open to the gospel. And so it was such an exciting time. And this student was one of the students, and he was a mining student, and he actually came from a Christian family, and he knew a friend. Well, you guys know Dory Manu. So Dory's friend led him into the fellowship, and so Dory introduced him to come to the fellowship, and so he came and he learned how to share his faith, and he ended up there's 24 minors in his class, and he led 8 of them to faith. So we often joked because our whole ministry on campus was mining dudes. There was no girls, there was no women. It was just a few English students and then the mining dudes. And so they were an interesting group, but they were very zealous in sharing their faith. And they had a vision to share the gospel with all the students on campus. Oh, yeah. So this was our core group. And so here we're on our campus. I think that we were celebrating my birthday, but we got together regularly to pray and to ask the Lord that we would have more opportunities to share the gospel and expand beyond our campus. So it was awesome because on our campus, in our city, there was 100,000 university students. And there was 3 big universities and then a whole bunch of smaller tech schools. And so the students really had a vision as we were sharing with them. The students really had a vision. In 1 Chronicles 16:24, it says, the glory of God, declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. And so we kept in talking to the students and saying, we're not sharing the gospel to make ourselves look good or even to have a good relationship with the local church. It's for the glory of God. We want the students to come to faith, not for our glory or so that we can have more friends in our fellowship, but it's for the glory of the Lord. And it was awesome to see them get a vision for wanting to see God's glory preached and expanded among our city. And this is another friend from that same servant team. She actually lives in Texas now. She married another missionary, and they moved to Texas. And she's in remission from having breast cancer. She's only 30, but it's really amazing how God has really done an awesome work in her life. And she actually wrote a book in Chinese and English and had it published through, a very small publisher about her faith and battling cancer. And it was exciting because her parents actually came to Christ through her, struggle in her battle. Okay, so that's just the verse that we were sharing. So, so throughout those years of sharing the gospel, God really gave us just great opportunity to further know him and like have people come to faith on campus. And then last year, we actually moved back from being in China, and so we're still like adjusting. I think we are adjusted, but after not really having lived in the Ottawa area for about 20 years, it's a little difficult to come back to, and we're living with my family, so we're house hunting, but it's a slow process. So when you don't live at home for a long time and then you go back to living with your parents, it's very difficult. But it's just been really exciting to see how the Lord has done things in China, and then we have people like students that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet in China, we can meet here in Canada. It's always surprising to me because when we first came back and we went on campus, I felt like everywhere I went, I could have been on a campus in China, because there would be like pockets of people by the Tim Hortons on campus speaking Chinese. And if I closed my eyes and I wasn't drinking a Tim Hortons, I would have thought I was in China, because there's just so many Chinese students. So what we're doing is in Ottawa is we are helping international students, not just Chinese. However, we have been focusing on Chinese students the last probably semester, because it's an easy, first of all, there's a lot of Chinese students that come. Out of all the countries, China sends the most international students. So on campus, probably at least 80% are from China. So naturally, they're the biggest population. Two, we both speak Chinese, so it's an easy connect to meet students, to approach them. And Chinese students are very open to hear the gospel. Like, I'm always shocked, or they at least want to be your friend. Whether they're open to the gospel, but they really want to make friends. And so what we want to do is help international students to connect socially. If you are an international student or you're a new immigrant, when you first came to Canada, it's probably difficult. I met with a guy who immigrated like many years ago here to Montreal, and he told me that when he came, he had no idea like where to buy a winter jacket, because he had come from a country that was relatively warmer than here. And he said, if the church had helped me, or if somebody had helped me figure out how to buy a winter jacket and boots, he bought boots, and they weren't really winter boots. So he said, the first day I wore them and my feet froze. So we want to help the students connect socially, physically, and spiritually. And a lot of students, socially, if they don't have a lot of friends, they have barriers towards making new friends, we want to help them. How can they make new friends? And how can they be involved in a social community and not just live by themselves and, feel very isolated? A lot of international students, if they're in Ottawa, there was actually a student who killed another student, and they were international students because part of it's just because they're going through a lot of things, but they're so isolated and they don't have friends to reach out and talk to, that they just feel like there's, no hope. And so we want to give opportunities for the students to be able to connect with a larger community. And I think it's really awesome if, as believers, that we can welcome them to our country, and just really help them with their needs, and then eventually introduce them to Christ. So I don't know how many international students there are here at the universities in Montreal, but in Ottawa, there's over 30,000. And the whole Canada, there's 240,000. And they say that the numbers are going to triple and stuff as time goes on. So it's a really huge need for us to be able to be reaching out to these university students, visiting scholars, new immigrants, to help them adjust. And for a lot of students, although many of them will stay, if they do return to their home, they can be beacons of light to their family and to their small towns. When people are sending missionaries, they're not sending to the small towns. They're thinking big cities, right? But if you're from a small town and they come to faith, then there's great opportunity for them to be able to go back and reach the places that we're not going to. So many every year, like students are coming from the 1040 window, the very place that we want to send missionaries to. But why would we fly 15 to 20 hours to go there when they're right on our doorstep? And I think especially maybe this week, as you think about Easter and preparing your heart, I know that everybody's busy, It's funny because all holidays seem to center around food, but, I know everyone's busy, planning, okay, what are we going to do for Easter dinner or whatever. But if you do know somebody, maybe you can invite them to, join your family or your roommates or whatever, to hear about the true meaning of Easter and being able to hear about Christ's death on the cross and the price that he paid so that we can have true freedom, and then his resurrection and how amazing it is that he did rise from the dead and that he's living and that we can know him. And so, I think just this week as you're doing all the preparations that you may be doing for Easter, if you can think about that. And I just want, these are some reasons why we're reaching international students, because Jesus commands us to make disciples, and we want to welcome the international students here to Canada and also to help them adjust. And so in Ottawa, we went skating on the Rideau Canal. I don't know how to skate. I thought I knew how to skate, but I realized I should have practiced before taking students skating. So I was like, I think I know how to skate. No, I don't. But, we're just doing things to get the students out and understanding something about Canadian culture. In Ottawa, if you don't skate in the winter, there's nothing else to do. And it's free. So, and then we celebrated Chinese New Year with students, and we had a Chinese New Year party. And a lot of students, I think, appreciate when we reach out during the holidays that they normally celebrate. So if your target audience is celebrating something else, maybe you can think about how you could welcome them to Canada, and especially during their time of not being with their family. And I just want to, in closing, I want to play a video. Okay, these are some websites about reaching internationals and just resources to reach international students. Okay, is this the video? Yeah. Okay, so I just want to close in and share this video in closing. So thank you.